I'm here in my kitchen today making Pugatista, also known as Povitica or potica. It's basically an Eastern European nut roll that I think so many cultures have a version of. This is our version. This is the recipe that my mom and my grandmother before her perfected and taught me many years ago. I have friends, one of my best friends says that this is the last thing that she wants to eat before she dies. It's that good. So let's get started. First, I'm going to show you how I grind the nuts. I have a simple KitchenAid attachment. My mom used to use the old-fashioned hand crank, but I bought this probably 15-20 years ago at Kohl's, and it works great to grind the nuts. You cannot use your food processor to grind up the nuts. It does not give them the ground texture that you need. So I'll show you how I do this. I just add the rest of the walnuts to my grinder, and I've already done most of the 4 cups per bowl. But I wanted to show you how easy it is, and they come out into the bowl and they're nicely ground up, and you get all those essential oils from the walnuts, and it gives it a unique taste and a unique texture. I will put the recipe up for you to see, but basically in each bowl I'm grinding up 4 cups of nuts. And that looks about done. So now you can see the texture of these is very much a meal of ground walnuts, as opposed to slicing them very finely through the blades of the food processor. Once I have my nuts ground up, I start adding my various flavorings to them. The first thing I add is a cup of sugar, brown sugar, 4 eggs, 1 stick of melted butter, 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. We like a lot of cinnamon. My mom only ever used a teaspoon and a half of cinnamon, but people have been telling me my Pugatista is better than my mom's, and I think it's because I have been using more cinnamon. A dash of salt, maybe a half a teaspoon, and about a teaspoon of vanilla. Once you have all of that, you mix it up, and it will ultimately look like this, which is a sticky ground nut mixture. I hope you can see that. And of course it's dark because of the cinnamon that you have added. So now we'll get started on the actual dough. These are your fillings, and you can set them aside, and once we're ready to fill the dough, we'll bring them back out. The next thing I'm going to do is get the dough ready. So into the bowl of my mixer, I have put 2 cups of flour. Into this bowl, I'm adding 2 packages of rapid rise yeast. That's hard to say this morning. And you can use whatever kind of yeast you want. This is what my mom used to use, so this is what I use. And I'm just going to stir that lightly to get it all mixed in together. All right, now I'm going to set this bowl aside until I have my liquid ingredients ready. In a small saucepan, I am putting 1/3 cup of shortening, 1/3 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and I do measure this, and 1 can of evaporated milk. I'm going to stir this together and put it over low heat until the shortening melts and it comes to a temperature of 120 degrees. The shortening will melt higher than that. My mom would test it on the back of her wrist and somehow she would know that it was 120 degrees once it had cooled. I am not that proficient at this, so I went to the dollar store many years ago and bought a candy thermometer, and once it's cooling, I use the candy thermometer to test when it has cooled down to 120 degrees. You don't want it higher than that because otherwise it will kill your yeast when you put it in with the flour mixture. So I'm going to get started on melting this and cooling it, and then I'll be back to show you how I mix it all together and form it into a dough. Okay, we're back. My mixture with the shortening has, first of all, warmed up to the point that the shortening has melted, and now it has cooled to 120 degrees. And so I'm going to add it to my flour and yeast mixture. And I just mix it until it's incorporated. You can see it's quite liquidy. I have also put 3 eggs in warm water to bring them up to room temperature. And now I'm going to add those one at a time to this mixture. Once your eggs have added, you can see that it's a very liquidy mixture. So now I add between 2 and 3 more cups of flour. I'm going to start with 2 cups and add a little more if necessary. I think that's still a little bit wet and tacky, so I'm going to add about another ½ cup. And then I'm going to turn it out onto my counter and have my husband turn the camera to the counter so that you can see it. All right, you can see that it's still got some tackiness to it, and now I'm going to turn it out onto the counter. So now we're going to just dump it out onto the counter. You can see it's a pretty tacky dough. I'll add a little bit more flour into the dough as I fold it together and knead it. And so you just bring it together and you start kneading it using some of the flour that you put on your counter. I turn it and push it down. Turn it and push it down. And I'm going to do this for 2 to 3 minutes. And what you're doing is you're incorporating the yeast and activating the yeast in a nice, warm, doughy environment. And you can see just by turning with my bench dough, with my bench flour, it's very much coming together as a nice, pliable dough. I think that looks pretty good. What you can do to determine if it's ready is you push your hand in it, your little finger like that, and as you can see, if it bounces back readily, which this does, that's a nice elastic dough and it's ready to rise. So what I'm going to do now with my dough is I'm going to put it in a bowl to rise. And I'm going to add about a tablespoon so or so of oil and swirl it around my bowl. And then I'm going to take my dough and add it to the bowl and turn it a few times. Can you see all that? And then I'm going to cover this bowl with a clean cloth and put it in a warm place to rise for about an hour or until it doubles in size. Okay, it's been an hour and the dough has risen and doubled in size. This is what it looks like. Can you see that?
Yeah.
I'm going to dump it out onto my counter and I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to work with 1/2 at a time. So the second half I'm going to put back into the bowl and cover it with my towel while I'm working with the first half. What I do to make this a little easier to roll out is I pat it down and I try to start by patting it into a rectangle. And so before I even start rolling, I'm trying to get this into a manageable shape of a rectangle, just using my hands. You can see this is a nice pliable dough. Add more flour and then start rolling. So what I tend to do is I roll first into an elongated shape so that it gets more into the shape of a rectangle. It's not going to be a perfect rectangle, but it will be a very elongated oval with a rectangle type of shape. And you just keep rolling it out. And what I do is about this point, I take my dough, which you can see is a nice pliable dough, and I turn it over. And I add more flour. And I continue rolling. All right. Okay, I have finished rolling the dough. Just to give you a general idea, it is 33 inches long and 2 feet tall. And as you can see, it's impossible to do this without getting flour everywhere. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my bowls of ground walnuts and I'm going to just start dolloping the dough with the mixture. I always leave a little bit of mixture left in the bowl for the end to make sure that I have enough of this mixture to cover the dough. And I always use it on the spots that look a little bit light. All right, so you can see I've left a little bit of the mixture in the bowl. And now I'm going to take my offset spatula and I'm going to just start spreading the mixture all over the dough. I have been spreading the nut mixture, and you can see I have a little bit left. And Doug, why don't you lean the camera so that they can see the actual dough filled with the mixture. I see that I have a couple of small spots that maybe didn't get as much as I'd like it to. They're a little thin, so I'm going to use the leftover dough, the leftover nut mixture to fill in my extra spots. All right, so this is the fun part. What I do is I start rolling from the long end, and you roll this in a fairly tight roll. And my husband often comes in at this point and helps. So he'll help me today. But you can do this by yourself too. You just make nice, even rolls. Just gently roll. And you can see I put the mixture all the way to the very edges. And that's it. Now what I do is I take my pan that I put parchment in, and I cut 3 rolls the length of my pan. Hopefully you can see this. Then I lay each roll very gently into the pan. And I'll do the other 3 rolls with the other dough right now, and then I'll come back and show you what I do before I bake them. We have 6 rolls in the pan. This is just a Wilton cake pan my mom bought probably 50 years ago, if not longer. It's 19 by 13 inches, and they still sell them. I have melted some butter, and I'm going to brush the rolls with melted butter before they go into the oven. As soon as they come out of the oven, I will brush them with melted butter again. This makes a nice brown crust on this wonderful yeast dough. I will bake these now at 350 for a half an hour, and when they come out they'll be nice and golden brown and very ooey gooey on the inside, and all my aunts and uncles will fight for a roll. My husband has decided that today we are going to make 6 more rolls so that we have enough for porch drop-offs for Easter. All right, it smells fantastic in here. Cinnamon, butter, vanilla. How can you possibly go wrong? I literally just took these out of the oven. They baked for 30 minutes, and now I'm going to brush them with one more coating of melted butter. That's why these rolls are really a special holiday treat as opposed to everyday treats. My husband, I think his mouth is watering over there. The smell of these just brings me back to my childhood. This is what we had every Christmas, every Easter, on special occasions. My grandma would make these. You could smell them as we pulled up to her house. You could smell them from the street. And same thing with my mom. When she made these, the whole neighborhood could smell them.
And where did these come from, hon?
These are Eastern European nut roll. We're Croatian, and so these are Croatian and Slovenia. But I think literally every Eastern European country has a version of this. So you can see they're golden brown. They are just wonderfully delicious, and I'm going to take them out of the pan and put them on cooling racks, and then I will let my husband be the taste tester. All right, we are done. I can show you that I've put these on cooling racks. You can see, hopefully you can see the nice coils that these make as you roll them up, and that nutty filling with brown sugar and cinnamon is wonderful. I have taken one of the rolls and I'm going to cut a couple of slices and have my husband be my official taste tester. These are very nice and moist, and they're very hot right now. That's what the inside looks like. Can you see that, Doug?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful with tea, wonderful with coffee, or just by itself. Doug, would you like to try one?
You try yours, and I'll try the other one.
Here.
I got one right here.
No.
I don't need a plate.
Oh.
It ain't gonna last.
It ain't?
It ain't.
So cheers to Pugatista.
It's messy, but man, it's worth it. That was good.
The inside is very gooey and melty.
Too bad, Uncle Mike and Aunt Barb, you're not getting it hot and fresh.
My Aunt Barb and my Uncle Mike, my Aunt Pat, my Aunt Nancy and my Uncle Tom, my brother, my friend Lisa, my friend Vicky, they're all going to be vying for one of these rolls, which is why we're going to make 12 of them and do porch drop-offs. These freeze really well. Once they've cooled down, you can wrap them in saran wrap and then in foil and stick them right in the freezer. When you're ready to eat them, take them out, leave them in the wrap on the counter, let them defrost for about 2 hours, and then unwrap them and slice them, and it will be wonderful. I hope that you enjoy this wonderful family treat that I've made for you today, and in honor of my mom, let's all be kind and nice to each other. Happy Easter.